Great Giza Pyramid. Let's start with the subterranean chamber. The subterranean chamber, or chambers, and I'm drawing it quickly and I'll point out things as I go along. The elevation of the inlet that goes to the subterranean chamber is at the same elevation as that. The lower level should be at the elevation of the top of the fins that go across the room. Now within there, this goes down and comes back up. And when it does that, the elevation at the highest point of here and the elevation at the lowest point here, the way it kind of comes down, those should line up with the teeth within here. So actually the way I drew it was poor because it should come down a lot further. On the, what would that be, the south side, I believe this, well, I'm not going to believe, those line up with the elevations here. And whether it is done in a pattern that cuts off a gas or density, or whether it's done to where it allows a certain density water in and up, is actually up for negotiation. We'll try both ways and see what's happening, and if somebody really understands how heavy water and the creep factor works, it's either it's like a multi-phase separator, and it's separated one way or the other. But either way, now this whole fin area is not functional. That is informational, and you know that because it was covered with rocks, so that the information, the hieroglyphics within the structure, the map key, it's more like the key, was protected underneath the rocks. The top edge of here is ribbed. Now it looks like it's only ribbed, honestly, about a ½ inch over about 18 inches, but it is ribbed. Here, for the first, well, this is about, this here is about 18 feet, this here is about 6 feet, another 6 feet. So you're looking at the scale. This is about 20 feet across, this is about 50, I think 53 feet beginning to end. It has an area when looking down upon it where it zigzags in such a way that you can practically see through it, but not really. Very thin thing, and you can see that it was molded in stages, such that the frame that was in there when they molded it could be taken out, where I don't think it would have actually been able to come out straight. You can get a really good video of that at GoPro2015.giza.ws or GoPro2015.greatgizapyramid.com. About 36 minutes into it, the gentleman uses his GoPro and goes down there. Really good shots. If somebody who does it slower, actually takes the time and crawls through there and pans around, or somebody's nice enough to do it with a 3D camera or a 360 camera, please shoot me, send me that video. I will love you forever. But and I'll put your video on one of my playlists. But that's what I'm looking for. Anybody who comes through this structure with a 360 camera, please send me that link. This area for the first about 6 feet is as smooth as can be surface. So smooth, it's ridiculous. Then there's about a tooth that goes up about 2 inches squared there, and then it comes down on the other side about a ½ inch lower than the plane of this level. And then from here there's a whole stucco-y looking thing for about 12 feet. Now that stucco-y looking thing, if you look at it, does have a pattern. It's kind of like you're flying over a mountain or a valley with some, hills and stuff. And that is designed, I believe, to separate the gases. The hydrogen would be brought up into the stucco-y area and piped back into the system, where the oxygen would be allowed to vent out of the system. And as the oxygen crawled across the smooth area, it would create a nice big bubble. And when it bubbled out, it would create a nice back pressure hammer. And when it did that, you can see this being about 24 feet or whatever-ish, you see about 4 piles of dirt so that we can calculate or guesstimate the exact frequency and or amount of pressure that that particular hammer exerted. Yeah, anyway, that would then come into the system, and in older pictures here you can see that they were closer together, about every, they almost lined up with the ribs, but they really didn't line up with the ribs. And I think probably depending on exactly how it happened, by average 1 or 2 of them would line up with the ribs and get some sort of a reaction. Either they wanted to get it right on the rib where it was at its highest point and actually do some cavitation there, or squishing, maybe, I don't know, or they wanted to do it at the lowest point and get some cavitation. I'm not sure what it is. Maybe if they got it right in front of it, it would cause pressure to pull one way and actually get some cavitation, amplify the pressure thing. I don't know. Somebody who understands hydraulics and how the pressures within a pipe would work and the no-no things to do, that's probably one of the things they're looking for, because they were looking for a reaction. Nature would do something, and they were looking for that reaction within nature. As you move up into the system, we get to the grotto. Okay, so anyway, oxygen's coming out. Let's blow this area up to the exit of the system. And the grotto is at ground level. Let's put ground level here. Okay, so we'll stick the grotto at ground level. We got the upper bubble, got the lower bubble, and the main pit, and the conduit's going out to the south, and the conduit that goes from the lower section to the upper section. Okay, we already talked about the lower section. We have a gas coming out the top of here, separating hydrogen and oxygen. The primary source of the hydrogen is going to come out here, piped out the conduits out of the south wall and up to the king's chamber. We'll get to that when we get to the top. This gas coming out, as it comes out of the system, it's going to do a couple of things. Number one, it's going to go through a series of gates. And these gates will make it so that we're going to have a pool within a pool within a pool. And let's go ahead and build our first gate. First gate will be this outer lip here. That outer lip there is going to be just below the floor line of what is referred to as the Queen's Chamber hallway, which then falls into the pool within the Queen's Chamber itself. So we're looking about like that. This will make it so that the waters within the structure will only be overflowed by these waters when the pressure in here actually is greater, or the water pressure comes up above that level and puts enough pressure on here, which will allow the gases within here to allow a little bit more pressure to come out. So it's a pool within the whole system, and that will actually have a gate which comes down and will cause that. So any waters in here, the pressure within the system will keep that gate, that pool there. When more waters are added to this side of the system, this is actually what goes down to the grotto pit area. There is a piece that actually comes down, and I would say you can say shorts with the lower section, and that will eventually fill with water. But even that water, when it pools, it will, until the water pressure in here is great enough to push down on that or when it is great enough, it will push down on that and maintain that at its water level, whatever that particular pressure is. Now we amplify the system because as this system grows, the air pressure in here actually becomes less than that and allows the water level in here to come up a bit, but never as high as the water level on the outside of the system, which is about halfway through the Queen's Chamber, or what they like to call the Queen's Chamber. I like to call it the Ark Room. We're gonna start throwing my names in here. Gonna wean myself off of the whole tomb dogma as much as possible. But the water level on the outside of the system is going to be much higher. It may even be as high as the top of there, but I'm not sure it's quite that high. I think more it might come to the elevation that this particular, the elevation of the bottom edge of the chevron, which is on top of the structure, which would go in line with the two chevrons that are outside under the elevation markers of the waters within the system. Within here, we're going to have our pools. Let's see if I can draw this better. As it comes down into the system, we got that one shelf which comes down, cuts this a bit, goes up. Okay, this is actually more like that. And between the area where it falls into, oh, this is actually a whole lot more room here. There's like you could play a nice game of ping pong within there. There's so much room in reality. Okay, so about that. And anybody who really wants to yell an artistic license, we can play with the nitty gritties later. This actually tees into the back wall at about halfway up the elevation there. But what that is going to do is, the way this whole thing is teetering, and this gets wanted to be at a slightly negative pressure, and the pressures in here are building up, we're going to lift the water level within the system a little bit, in line with the markings within the niche that goes back into the tail of the Queen's Chamber, in the Queen's Chamber, the Ark Room. That dictates our fine water level that we're working with the pressures. And the way that the room is, the way that niche is shaped, not really perfectly square. You'll see that one area will come up and over and might be like that, and the next area, the wall comes over, and that lines up with the tooth up here. They're working in relational information. One thing relates to another to show the pressures within these areas and how they affect the water levels within the system, all the locks and the effects that they have within the water level. And when we actually play with that, and including the locks within the bottom that we already talked about, the multiple phase separator we were talking about, we can see how the pool of water within the system is floating on a bubble of oxygen. So it's separated from all the ambient static electricity and environment outside by that pool of oxygen. The water level is allowed to recede a little bit, but is maintained because in that spillway, within the wall, they have the they like to call the pools on the, I call them pools, they call them, I don't care what they call them, but they're the pools, because when this whole thing is working, it's water that's pooling inside of it. Anyway, this pool on the bottom, it has where when it overflows, it spills down into the well shaft and will maintain the water level at or slightly just below the level of the water within the within that hallway that goes down. In fact, the more I think about it, about halfway down here, there's a hole, a nice circular hole drilled within the system, within the hallway. That circular hole has a depth that's about 1 or 2 inches. That would be the level that the fine point where that is, and should be the water level that the system is maintained at, because I believe that is the marker. Circles all usually show the air pressure, the atmospheric pressure, gas pressure within the system, which is why there's a circle on the top, the last part of the area before it comes into the King's Chamber, that one conduit that comes into the King's Chamber. It's an oval there. There are 2 sets of ovals, actually 3. One, the spillway down, and the one down the side, which show the way they are shaped, whether they are an oval or a circle. In fact, that's a circle. That's almost a pure circle. So I think that's showing, what they want to be the zero pressure, the atmospheric normal pressure. And what that will allow is the waters to have a lighter water come upon here, get to a fill level, where when it gets to a certain fill level, actually the way it's shaped with the one thing down, it has a fill level where when it gets to that particular fill level, it can come up and spill down, maintaining a lighter water on the surface, but allowing the heavier water to get to an area where it can get up to and spill down, maintain the lighter water on top, siphoning off the slightly less dense water from the middle system down into the system to get separated into its respective gases and do it again. And it's a quite neat lock system. Same thing is up at the top. We didn't really get to appreciate that just yet. So let's go appreciate the top area. The topmost of the system, what we're doing is the gas, the hydrogen gas, which I said was piped out of the grotto, out of the holes in the southern wall of the grotto down there. It's piped out and up to one of the levels, the 2nd or 3rd level of the King's Chamber, the one where they find the seeds and the shells and the gas and stuff. The one which should line up with the on the 3rd pyramid, where that niche, the top niche, takes place. That comes down. Now we're going to truncate this out. We already discussed the grotto out of sight on mind now. And I'm going to make that a little bit smaller. We got the system as we know it here, and the pit in the bottom of the what I like to call the combustion room, and in the west north corner is a pit about 10 feet deep. Don't like to be talked about very much. This gas is brought up into here. The pressure is built up, comes down. We're going to have a lock system again within the bottom of the King's Chamber, the combustion chamber, where the gas will come down into the lock system and the pressure will be allowed to come out and bubble into this area across the back west wall, where there's some bricking back there, and we'll allow it to come up and bubble into the system through a pool of water. This is our flashback arrestor to keep the reaction within the King's Chamber from exiting the King's Chamber and causing big nasty explosions. They want to control the explosion. So, comes up into the room. How do we control the explosion? Well, a couple of things. This area over here, which is where they have that funky looking entrance area, that is constructed, or we're going to construct it, such that it has an oval across the back there, and when that oval comes into the system, it is at an elevation which this right here actually cuts that, such that the conduit that comes out of here is actually going to be below water level, and then it cuts up through there, and out to the edge of the system. And this conduit is going to allow this to short to the edge of the system. And ours, we're going to, well, in the system as it is, it's acting like a big Van de Graaff generator. That's where it collects the static electricity. But we're going to play with this in a minute. This is constructed such that the edge of it just pierces the wall, and it is in a nice square shape, where that comes down with oval right there, so that the symmetry of the room is perfect. Static electricity within there, this particular nipple breaks the symmetry, we get a spark. That spark is in the perfect area where the ambient air, normal air, 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, and CO2 to make Al Gore happy. That all comes in, we get the wonderful spark, an abundant amount of hydrogen, and we're going to get water. Now this water is going to fill the system, and when it fills the system, we're going to retrofit a wall approximately there. The boss mark being here, and the thieves' tunnel entrance being here. What we're going to do is within here, until it pools and fills up, it's actually just going to be a random roar. But when it does pool and fill up, it will be so that as this water level comes up, it chokes off the reaction here, making it so that less air comes into the room, and it will dull the reaction. So we don't need the reaction to be going and going and going. It kind of maintains itself at a nice steady burn, kind of like your water heater does. It doesn't have that the whole time. Anyway, the warmth of this water will allow evaporation. The evaporation is going to do two things. It's going to come up through this conduit to the edge of the pyramid where it's got all that wonderful static electricity, which is gathering to this very day, except for the fact that we put a little antenna on the top to vent it off so that it isn't annoying. But if we knock that off, it will start collecting to this very day. The condensation will be a conduit, and or the water vapor will pull the static electricity as it bumps into each other, replicates down into the system. As it condensates, the condensation will actually fall down into the thieves' tunnel through that one conduit that goes up through the wall. Pool, that water will come down, go down through the spillway, which we have now made a grand step. But if you look at it, it was a spillway. The static electricity riding on the surface of the water, because that's what static electricity does, will come down right underneath that step, the way it is configured, and be captured within the center of the conduit. Pools on the side of the conduit will allow areas that static electricity will look to seek to get to, but can't really ever get there because of the way the system is constructed. the way with the fins on the side, with the condensation, we're going to have constant amounts of raindrops. These raindrops and precipitation are going to help pull the static electricity down into the system and give any bit of static electricity in the area to jump up, but it really can't get up there. It's going to be brought down by the law of averages. It's going to be brought down further and further into the system. And then the water levels and the densities of water, as we discussed, we maintained within the pressures of both the water level and the gases within the environment within the Queen's chamber and that whole level. And playing a little water level game with the pressures outside and the gates to get into the system as they are constructed to spill down into the system will maintain the water level, like I said, within the Queen's chamber. So you're going to get static electricity brought down into the system to a lower elevation than the water levels on the outside of the system, maintained at a lower elevation, but because I believe the evaporation, or condensation, that's constantly continuing within the Grand Gallery and within the Queen's chamber, at least as far over where there's least amount of reactions. Oh, didn't get into some of the reactions here. Within the King's chamber, you got the water coming down to the Thieves' Tunnel. You've got your water level out here being maintained because of the pool. You've got your antechamber area and your boss mark. Gotta do this right. Put the boss mark over here. And Grand Gallery. Bing, bing, bing. Alright, so here's a quick, easy drawing, okay? This is water. We also have condensation within here is being caught into like a trough on the upper area, held above the water level by a distance that is about halfway between well, I guess it would be at an elevation that goes, well, you can see it on the back of the boss mark, about where the boss mark splits. That would probably be exactly where it is. Right where the boss mark splits. Right there is the bottom of the trough, and that just takes water, drips it over the edge, down into the system, and we're going to get a I know they were able to get a Lord Kelvin type reaction drip generator, because you can see evidence of scarring of a spark. That particular spark is every now and then, when it occurs, going to ignite the gases within here and cause a push of the gases down into the system. Further being one of the variables in the system. Every now and then there's going to be a push. Along with, we talked about how the waters bubble out from the bottom and cause that little pressure pump. You're going to get a ripple every now and then within the system. But that ripple, although it's going to occur on one side, I guess the water level would be, because of the pressures the way it is, the water level is going to rise slightly above the floor of the Queen's chamber. The arc chamber. And that will maintain the water level at a higher elevation, so that the ripple may come across into the system itself, into where the Queen's chamber is. And then every now and then you're going to have this, which is going to be a pressure going the other way. So you're going to have a variable of these pressures, so it's going to be a constantly manipulated but maintained system. And I'm very appreciative of the way I'm in awe of the way they had the maintenance be on the other side of an air bubble from the system within, so that the mean pressures are practically at a constant. Well, they are at a constant. And if you don't appreciate the tech that went into this, the knowledge of the environment that we live in and the elements that we play with, and static electricity and all the things that we are just learning. Heavy water. We didn't know anything about heavy water until 100 years ago, 1940. They document and demonstrate that they were much more knowledgeable than we give them credit for. Thank you. Have a nice day.